what our intent around this is, we want to focus on alumni in sports. There are 5 categories I have picked. There's so much you can talk about around alumni and how they fit in, but the 5 categories I've really focused on is Hall of Fame, either establishing, building one out, growing what you currently have, fundraising for sports specific initiatives, sporting events that you have today, coach communication. So how do you loop in, more communication from the source itself, and then alumni attendance of just coming to the existing world of the sports initiatives that you have going on already. Now, when we think about sports and alumni, everyone grows up around sports. People have this affinity towards cheering on teams. So there's a real ability to focus on the nostalgia, the achievements, the success, the feeling of camaraderie and participation, even if you're not on the field itself. So there's a huge opportunity here to bring alumni into efforts that already exist, and it shouldn't be too hard a lift to actually loop them into current events. That said, of the 5 categories that I've selected here, what we're trying to do is build off of low stakes, something you can do immediately, up to what takes higher effort for you to maintain and ongoing grow, or from a resource standpoint, might have some monetary impact as well. So those are the 5 buckets. If there's anything else you want to talk about, just add it into the chat. And we're going to just go through those 5 buckets and then move forward from there. So the first one is this concept of attendance. So you already have sports initiatives and games and leagues that your school is a part of. There are locals who are parents, who are alums, that might want to be attending if there are rivals, if you are in, the end of season finals, all of that. So what already exists today of published sports calendar, is that accessible to your alumni base? What you need to think about is taking advantage of what already exists and making sure it's accessible for anyone to view. And it's not hard to navigate. The best thing that I have to say, and I will say it over and over and over again, is you all are alums yourself from whatever institutions you attended. You can consider your experience as, what would an alum do? What would I do for my school? How do I navigate to these resources? Is this easy for me to find? On top of that, beyond just the sports calendar, what you want to think about is, do you target your messaging based on who is local? So rather than over spamming people where it's the full alumni base who a lot of times won't be able to attend these events, do you target the people who are in your region to return back? So this does require a little bit of knowledge. So I'm going to try and capture some resources required at the bottom of my slide sometimes. And this is where you're going to focus on, you need some email outreach capabilities. You need an existing sports calendar that's easy to access. And you do need that data list of local alumni. That list should be continuing to be updated over time, but bottom line, it means that you're not over communicating to people who would never be able to join in an event that's local, especially if it's not around an alumni weekend or holiday or what have you. That way you don't want to lose traction on your email open rates. If you're sending information that's not relevant to them, that's how you have drop-off rates from email opens. So that's what we're going to focus on, is targeted communication to the right people at the right time. So when you think about really getting the game itself, you've got these sports, the games happening. What can you do live time, especially if it's around any sort of league games? As I said, like, you're going to have those rival schools. Can you have a presence, like an alumni table? If it's going to be a large enough presence, having a table, having someone there to welcome people with just some alumni resources, maybe you've got some giveaway swag. I would say, don't create explicit materials for the game itself. You probably have already some sports gear. You probably have some easy keychains and other materials to pass out. This isn't an initiative that should be a high resource drain. It's just something where you've got a presence, you're acknowledging that alumni do attend these. And that actually also helps parents to see that you're continuing to support people well beyond them actually attending and gracing your school as a student. The data collection is always something to consider too. If people are live and present, making sure their information is up to date or you have the right email on file. So definitely have that form available. On top of that, consider collecting more information around what sports teams people were a part of at your institution. If you don't have that data collected already, I will give reasoning to that down the line. Again, we're kind of building up that progression of easy, lower hanging fruit, what's available to you today versus what can you get to over time. Having the data on what sports teams people are a part of helps you really start to reach out in more personalized manner that could result in better fundraising, better engagement, and what have you. So for this, from a resources required, it's as easy as a quick folding table with the person staffing the table, maybe some swag, having that data form, whether it's a tablet, it could be like just a quick page that people can write on. The challenge with that is handwriting, sometimes hard to read. I actually just experienced that this morning where someone wrote out their email and I couldn't tell if it was an L or a one or a capital I. So that is the one drawback around handwriting. So unless you can confirm it live time, then sometimes having that digital type in is helpful for a tablet. And then that list of existing resources, I would say alumni resources, handouts are really easy to lose. So if you have just something that someone can reference as, hey, these exist and you can find it on our website or like QR code, and I'll get down to that information a little later as well. But just be mindful of truly how much you're handing out because think about yourself. That paper is going into a back pocket, getting crumpled up, and could be lost in a car type thing. So make sure that the effort you're putting in is going to be relevant and used. And can you redirect people because everyone will have their phone to having that resource online. So from a wavelength standpoint, and the printable resources and all of that, you could have like an online portal as well where you're inviting people into a system. We, for events, actually really encourage having QR codes. You can do like in-person registration to get people onto your alumni portal if you have one. This allows you to just do in-person registration so that when you're live time with people, they're not having to do multiple confirmations, go into their email, find the login link, all of that. It's if they have that in-person registration, that one-time password you give them, you can toggle on and off so that in-person events, very easy for them to get all of those online resources. So think through what resources you have on hand, what's accessible online, what's gated for people, and how easy it is for them to access right in the moment or later on, how easy it is for them to find navigating through your website or social posts, what have you. So that's just basic events. You've got the sporting events. I'm not even touching the homecoming and everything because that's something that we can address later. Those are also some table stakes initiatives, but the sporting games, those exist. Use what already you have scheduled as events as a school, be able to tack on the alumni angle. The next step is really around communications. So this angle is bringing in live updates around the season to your alumni base. Sometimes you're going to want alumni-wide updates, especially if it's a really successful season. Other times, it's also really fun just to get ongoing season updates and hearing from the source themselves, being the coach. Now, with that in mind, it does require you having that list of who did what sport. By that, I mean not everyone's going to want to hear about from every single coach about every single sports topic. If you have the ability to capture data of previous seasons and those lists, they exist. They're printed in the yearbooks. We'll go into detail later on how to capture that. But coaches giving updates, it's really fun for alumni to either recognize the name of the coach or really be able to hit that nostalgia of, wow, I remember playing on that field, or I remember playing this school. and, being able to cheer along as the season gets going. I would say don't do a full throttle rush on every single sport. Focus on those few sports that a lot of people are invested in. Definitely consider from a gender perspective, like representation across the spectrum there, multiple different seasons, but it's a larger lift for you to have to manage every single sport at once. Focus on those sports that you've got the largest following or highest engagement overall. That targeted messaging as well really helps you to be able to get that targeted group engaged and will impact the ability for you to get return on that fundraising, on them attending future alumni specific sporting events. So gathering that information now, very helpful. In terms of what this lift is compared to just taking advantage of current sporting events, you've got coaches' input, and this could be just a quick 2 or 3 liner of really excited about the season. We've got strong defense, and we've got a hard few games ahead. Come cheer us on. Whatever that might be, it could just be a few lines. It shouldn't be a big ask from the coach because it got a lot of other stuff going on. You're going to be putting that into an alumni portal, into an email outreach. Again, going back to that alumni data list, that is sports specific, or you could do a, newsletter wide if it's timely with an alumni output. In that newsletter, say, hey, here are a few comments from the coaches this season, and you can do it that way if you don't have the time or ability to specifically target out to those subgroup of alumni. When we're talking about targeted communication by sport, there are a few ways to get this list. One is start now so that those student systems, you're tracking that right now. Make sure it's pulled into your alumni database. If it's 2 different databases, or make sure that is turned over into a data tracking when that profile turns from student to alum. As I mentioned, there are yearbooks. You're also going to have other lists, whether it is from the alums themselves staying in touch with each other, to having other, distro lists from parent email groups. There are definitely a lot of historical information around your sports teams and who was a part of what team. What you're going to want to think through, and a lot of times the schools that we work with are using internships or student volunteers, parent volunteers to help gather this information. You're going to want to establish this list to help with future communications. This is beyond just the newsletter that I'm talking about, but being able to bring that group together so that they are coming together for alumni weekend. They're gathering at a pickup game during that alumni weekend and trying to gather momentum around the specific sport they're really into. On top of that, when you are gathering data, let's take a step back from sports. However, you're getting data and updates from your alumni base, you can actually be requesting them to raise their hand, say, I was part of this sports team, or I was part of these different groups on campus. That actually is helpful. While there's a barrier to entry in terms of it's asking more information from someone, if someone raises their hand to say, yes, I was a part of that, they're likely to be more engaged. There are times where students participate in sports when it's kind of just checking the box of a PE requirement. So you're not going to know that 100% of your lists are highly engaged users. But if someone identifies with, I was a part of that team, it means that they're higher likelihood of engagement down the line, open rates, or interest in that sport. Regardless, those ongoing data requests are definitely going to be helpful to try and get older alum data if you have historically not tracked that. So that also means building it out on, if you have an alumni portal, being able to add that to their own profile so it's identifiable. So again, resources required for something like this. You've got yearbooks, you've got volunteers. You do want to have this trackable in your database, in your CRM. Bottom line, at the bare minimum, a spreadsheet management of just, hey, here are the list of people. This comes from then submission forms or an engagement portal where people can self-identify with those groups. So what we have from a wavelength perspective is people being able to just self-select in to saying, hey, I was part of the soccer team. Now, this is very important when you're thinking through these forms. how are you receiving this information and how are you tracking it from a label perspective? Does varsity and JV matter? Are you only going to be targeting any one part of soccer? Are you going to have a girls soccer, a boys soccer? Are you doing general soccer? What you want to do is make sure that your labeling is consistent, because if I, as an alum, am signing up, I might say JV boys soccer versus varsity soccer. And all of a sudden, if you look at just soccer alone, you could have over 9 different potential tags for that: varsity soccer, JV soccer, soccer, boys soccer, JV boys soccer, varsity boys soccer. You get the gist. That gets really messy when you all of a sudden think of all the potential tags. You want to clean it up, be very particular, especially if you're just starting off, on how you want these tags to be curated so that it works for how you want to reach out to this group. So think through, what information are you gathering? What is that selection process of, are people able to select from a drop down on what sport they were a part of, so that you always have the consistent tag, or are you cleaning it up afterwards? But regardless, tracking sports is going to help you in any of the initiatives I talk about moving forward from this point. For example, like newsletter, as we said, that's really easy from a communication standpoint to do alumni wide, end of season reports about all of the sports teams. You can always be in those newsletters, adding also throwback success stories to previous years, what's been successful. This is the 10th year reunion of the swim team doing X. You can also continue to focus on alumni spotlights of those players that you've tracked who continue to be in that sport, be it college or professionally. I've been working with a school who's got some of their basketball players who were in March Madness and have been really successful. So spotlighting those students, former students, is a really great way to add more content into your newsletter. But again, that goes off of you absolutely knowing what they're doing, what sports they were a part of, and continuing to track. So there are some backtracking you can do. There's some backtracking you can do to get historic information into your system. Moving forward, there's some behaviors you can start off with that just set the baseline that you need to be able to be successful down the line. Communication resources required here would just be historical sports information. Your AD would probably have this information, so you're not having to track it all. The athletics department would have a lot of this. CRM tracking just of current students, talking with college guidance teams and the sports coaches who was recruited, being able to track that is definitely helpful. And then obviously your email services you already use for your newsletter. So this is a lower lift even without tracking sports, but communications wise, just think through easy content. People definitely have affinity towards sports. Making this a seasonal report, very, very low stakes, but easy delivery, and definitely interest in your alumni base. So we've just done sports, sporting events and communication. We are now moving into targeted fundraising. So this is where you're thinking about, hey, this specific team, we need new netting. There's, a turf we're trying to build out. You can do a non-traditional fundraising approach where it's not fully alumni-wide or community-wide, but you can actually be targeting people based on the sports that they were a part of. The appeals coming with some student narrative of, I love playing this game, like can't wait for a few more years of being part of this team. Please donate to help us have the best quality of whatever equipment you might need. This could be a way where you've got fundraising, people know exactly where it goes, they feel good about it because they have the memory themselves of that sport, of really enjoying it. Again, it goes back to that sports tracking we talked about, though. You want to make sure that you are keeping an eye on what teams people are part of so you can circle back to help them, or rather to tap into their engagement, one of that engagement point being money and fundraising. So, with that in mind, the fundraising tools, what you want to make sure you have is the ability for people to select where the money's going to. Similar to like capital campaigns, annual giving, people can select where things go. This targeted fundraising, you want them to be able to have that option of saying, no, I want, like, I'm giving on behalf of this sports team to this initiative so that they really feel like they know where their money is going. With the fundraising, you can always do challenges. So if it's a shared resource, like one turf across a few different sports teams, do you create a competition? Are there class years where you're trying to fundraise and provide different resources? So, there's like the home field net versus are you thinking about the wrestling mats? This is the class of 1971's wrestling mat. You can do different naming based on, what teams are giving what type of fundraising. It is lower amounts than what you're trying to reach from a capital and annual giving. So you want to make sure you're timing it correctly to other fundraising efforts throughout the year. But it does allow you to reach that goal, and you have the coach and students being able to do some easy thank yous where you can show like physical picture evidence of you helped to build this. And it can eventually lead to larger giving and larger asks over time, but this really hits personal, emotional giving capabilities. Let's go to the next slide. So then we go into the events space beyond just sporting games and matches that is already in existence. Thinking about events where alumni are either participating or explicitly brought into the fold, this is where you want to start thinking about having it be a community affair. Who else beyond alumni are present? Students, community members, parents. This is really where you have these events that are around initiatives that exist, like your homecoming, alumni weekend, holidays. I've previously given the example of day after Thanksgiving pickup soccer games, bringing people together. There's a lot that you can do here. The challenge is, again, participation. If you need a certain number of people to participate for these pickup games to be successful. That's why I oftentimes encourage Alumni Plus. It's alumni with their family, it's alumni with other current students, making sure that you actually have a full-fledged field of participants. You definitely want to make sure that you've got all of the members involved. These events would require, field space and staffing, but it doesn't have to be a huge affair. Like you're not having to add in from a budgetary standpoint for your alumni weekends, other than that field space that you couldn't potentially rent out or use. It's not like it's a big financial lift. It's more just the organizing and ensuring you have enough people. So this is where you can incentivize, can you do a pickup game where the students are present and they work with the coach on making that also a practice for them so that, or a practice replacement, so you have enough people for sure, or just like add it 30 minutes before or after, what have you. You just need to think through participation and making sure it fits into whatever other schedule you have planned for that weekend. Again, go back to yourself. If I'm visiting home being like my parents' place now because I live elsewhere or I now live locally, is the time, the location, and the ask something that's approachable to me at my current life stage, my chapter, my age? Or is this targeting like a younger alumni base? Or just ask yourself all those questions because it's going to really help you answer, is this worthwhile? Are we going to have the participation we want? From that standpoint, if you finally realize, hey, we're going to have enough people here, what do you do with making sure everyone is able to participate? Are you doing round robins? Are you making this a competition between years? How are, staff and community members brought in and still feel like they're involved and it's not just too alumni specific? You really want to ask all those questions leading up to that first game, but make it low stakes. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Don't put a lot of pressure on what the results are, other than this is a fun pickup game. It's a full community affair. Alumni, come join. Family, come join. and go from there. This is a real good test to see level of engagement people want to have outside of major events you're planning. Maybe you're having a gala for something, or you've got some other initiatives. This is a great little dip your toe in to see if we have some more casual gatherings, lower stakes resource wise, but it gets people out exercising outdoors. Do one of these, test it at different times of the season, and you can really see, is this something worthwhile to continue? Or, you know what, this is not the engagement or the type of activity our alumni want. This is low risk, but could be high reward. This last bit around Hall of Fame space is actually, I'm entering into this with getting it to the baseline of how you even establish a Hall of Fame. So some of you might already have a more formalized sports awards program for alumni. I'm going to start from scratch here. So tune me out or feel free to ask questions as we kind of do this step through process. But what you really want to focus on around a formal Hall of Fame is acknowledging past teams and their success and singular players. So you need to be really intentional around how are you framing this initiative. On top of that, what you're thinking through is where does this fit into other alumni programming I'm offering? Easy place to put this is in an alumni weekend or reunion year. That way that you're not having to create a whole nother major event, but it can be tacked on as a dinner, as an award ceremony, whatever it might be. I would say, especially if you're just starting off, loop it into a big weekend to start in the first place, because you're going to have the crowds, and usually it'll actually encourage some other people to come back because it's something people are really passionate about. So I'm going to acknowledge this is the largest lift because you are going to have to maintain it ongoing, but it could have that bigger return of more engagement. And that is engagement in terms of people returning from event registration to actual fundraising efforts to just getting better touch points because you're being relevant to them on passionate items that they were part of at your school. So very first thing you want to do is define a purpose. How are you approaching these awards or these acknowledgments? What's the criteria involved? Are we talking skill sets? Are we talking about the combination of academic and athletic ability, leadership, sportsmanship? And then going into like the performance and the contributions to the sport, you're also thinking beyond just the players themselves of you're going to have those coaches, those team managers. There's a whole lot of individuals a part of this community that could be considered for this Hall of Fame. You really want to think through what is that purpose? What's the criteria for induction? And what's the eligibility requirements? So are you going to have a young alumni award? Are you going to have an award for teams? Is it going to focus only on those reunion years? If you are hosting this event only during reunions where you're going to have those major 5, 10, 15, 20 years coming back, how are you going to focus on who to be celebrating? Is it team-wide? Is it singular? What scope? What you want to think about is how many teams would you be able to celebrate today? If you look back historically at your sports teams, which ones would you be able to pick out so you have that runway for the next few years of I've got this award? And it's not like you're going to have this pre-selected, because I'm going to go into a selection team in a future slide, but you just want to look back and say, I have enough awards, or sorry, I have enough back history to award a few people per year, or we need to make this singular award so that you have a runway of future awards down the line. It depends on the size of your institution, the number of sports teams you have, the type of sports teams, because you're going to have different number of, each sport has a different number of team members, or it could be a single player sport. So just think through about defining a purpose. Here's the thing that I neglected to state in this slide. You are not alone in making these decisions. You're going to want to bring in the athletic department. So this is also a joint initiative that you have to work with them on, because they're going to have the information. They're probably going to be voting in this. So this is also a partnership you have to think about. So that selection committee that I referenced, you're going to want to think through who is in charge of reviewing nominations, selecting the criteria, the inductees participating in the event itself. These could be coaches, your athletic directors, alumni, teachers. Is there a student representative? What you want to do is make it so that when you're developing this committee, I say this for every volunteer-led event, or sorry, volunteer-led initiative, you need to define expectations of what is the ask of this individual? How much time is it going to take? What are the skill sets required or knowledge that they need to have to be able to actually participate in this volunteer role? And if you develop a selection committee volunteer role, you'll be able to better identify who needs to sit on this. Also, what's the voting criteria? So this is where you start to define that nomination and selection process. Who can submit nominations? Can anyone? Is it only from the committee? Is it from the athletics team? Are there administrators from your school who can submit? What needs to be submitted? So providing those guidelines of what's going to differentiate someone to be submitted here. Is it their records and statistics? Is it their personal story of their success after departing your school, continuing on in this sport? How do you be inclusive in this? You want to make sure that you are aware of the inclusivity of a variety of sports, variety of player capabilities, gender, all of that. So full team, unique players. Make sure that as you're developing this selection process, that you are aware of, you are not pigeonholing yourself. So only the same profile type will be picked every single year. You want to make sure that you're acknowledging the skill sets that, especially if we're talking records and statistics, sometimes it's a lot easier to track certain statistics in certain sports than it is in others. So how do you address that across a variety of sports? The voting process as well goes back to, after the nomination, that selection committee. Is this a majority vote? Like, are people putting a point system? How are they voting? What should they be voting based
Of
off?
course,
And then
the
I'm
check and the horrible
Cheryl,
looking
I'm just
envelope
gonna mute
is
you, I think, unless you're trying to speak. Um, so with the nomination process here, you want to put a definition. I'm going to step back to what I was saying with the selection committee. What you want to do is actually create a role, set expectations of you are going to be a volunteer, you're going to be a committee member. This is what is expected of you. You are going to be either nominating and researching who should be a part of this. At some point, you are going to be put forth with these list of nominees, and you're going to be voting based off of this criteria. And then we hope that you are present during the actual delivery of the award ceremony. So develop a full volunteer role. We have reviewed volunteer roles before in terms of how to create, how to support, and all of that on a previous roundtable. I'm happy to revisit that if anyone has questions. But that selection committee, you also want to define terms. How long are they on the committee for? Is there a recruiting process to make sure you continue to have that committee supported and growing, or able to replace people as those who retire or leave? You want to think all of this through before actually getting this launched. Having this written out and considered is going to be important to help in maintaining and making that maintenance that much easier. So you've got the committee established. You've got the nomination and selection process completed. Now what you want to do is think through, how do you actually design that Hall of Fame? Where is it going to be located? This doesn't have to just be a physical space. Physical space might be really hard at your school right now. There's a way to have a dedicated digital representation on your website, social media, what have you, that allows you to celebrate all of this information, but not have a physical space. The intent eventually might be to have a physical display. You could start small and grow into it. Again, it's so site specific that I can't really give advice there. You're going to have to work with your buildings and ground, work with your athletic department. But ultimately, how do you capture this from a longevity standpoint? How do you have people return, being able to see those fun old photos, be able to see those celebratory, really successful years? How do you continue to track that plaque of who's received this award in the past? If you do have a physical display already today, I would say great, make it digital as well, because there are a lot of people who can't physically return. We've become more and more geographically dispersed across the US and internationally when you see about people's moving rates today versus historical generations. So, how do you still make it relevant to those who can't return back to your school? So, make sure you think through bare minimum digital Hall of Fame space that is resource wise, both from a physical standpoint and monetary standpoint, easier to maintain and add to. The physical display is really special. People can return to, see their own name on the board. Their students can see it and aspire for it. So there are perks to both. You just have to think through your resource capabilities. Bottom line, digitally having it accessible, very helpful. And from that website and visual space, we work with some schools where they actually have it like gated behind their alumni community. So have that so that the repository, all of those photos, it's fun for alumni to be able to view, but it's not the entirety of the community of access. This gets people into your alumni portal, this gets people, seeing that special access, and it removes any sort of privacy and all of that. So it's truly just the people who should know can see and be able to also share some of their own photos of, this was us on the sidelines, or here's our team celebrating um, at this goal or what have you. So there's a lot from a repository standpoint that you can actually have people submitting, and you can actually be receiving a lot of resources that you can repurpose either with printouts to your physical location or add to your digital Hall of Fame with some photos that your alumni have held on to. So you've got the committee, you've started the nominations, you've selected the individuals. Now it's talking about the induction ceremony itself. So what you want to do is bring it into the major school event, as I mentioned. You can do a specific banquet that's sports related. You could have it, during homecoming, which is that sports angle again, or you can bring it into reunions or an alumni weekend that you already have pre-scheduled, and maybe you do it over a happy hour and drinks before other major events happen. During that ceremony, it depends on the length of time that you want to spend on this, especially if you're just starting off or if this has been established for a while. Who is potentially speaking, who is presenting the award, what accomplishments and what type of material are you providing? Is this going to be live streamed so you can actually share this out visually to, a larger base of individuals so that it's not just to those who could attend in person? Are you providing certificates, trophies, what have you, to actually deliver a physical entity to the award winner? And maybe you have an ongoing plaque where you have people be able to add names throughout the years of who's received this specific award and have that permanently at your institution, whether that is a plaque at the field, whether it is in the Hall of Fame in your athletics department space, wherever it might be. Think through what is the longevity of this award being present physically, both at your institution as well as for that individual and that alum who can bring it back to their house and feel recognized for their efforts. When it comes to maintaining and evolving the Hall of Fame, you want to make sure that you are regularly updating it. And by that, I'd say annually. So make sure you think through the amount of effort it takes for you to be able to maintain it. When I say regularly update, that's a combination of those award winners, but also are there, as I mentioned with those photos, are there other resources you're trying to add and do a facelift of to capture more successes? Alternatively, you also want to be capturing the current class year of, what those sports successes are this year, so you can return back to those wins at a later date. So how are you recording previous seasons, current seasons, and future seasons so that you know how to monitor this down the line? Maybe you put a little like you yourself are going to recognize, hey, this is a team to remember, at their 5th year reunion. They should be nominated down the line. How are you tracking those notes? You have so much on your brain. Make sure when you're thinking about regularly updating, it's not just current events, but being able to capture notes for future to help the Hall of Fame down the line. The information around this Hall of Fame should be shared out. It should be celebrated with students, with other fellow alumni. This is how it gains traction through the years, is being able to send, again, easy newsletter content. We had a great celebration around this sport, this class team, this individual, whatever it might be. Here's a little write-up on it, some photos. Do you all have any memories from your own sports teams? We'd love to gather them and capture them for future nominations. So there's a lot of return that comes from the memories of your alumni base, and then also your students get engaged as well. So I've done a lot of talking at you all, and I'm going to give you back some time, but we've covered Hall of Fame. We've covered some basic, easy fundraising, low stakes, that you could drum up some fundraising from alumni who are just very invested in the sport. That comes from tracking who is a part of what team. You've got the sporting events themselves. So you've got the games, you've got the matches happening already. Loop in alumni or provide those updates. And that comes from coach communication, broad communication from you, just celebrating current events. And then that alumni attendance is looping them into what already exists, or have alumni specific events that are community wide. So you're not worrying about total numbers, but it really allows for that camaraderie of, we love this sport. It's a quick pickup game. Come join, all ages welcome, any skill set welcome. And just being able to have some programming there where easy touch points brings joy to people. So this was high level review on how alumni can be brought into sports, and I appreciate your time. If there's anyone who has questions and want to stay later, let me know. I'll stay on for a few minutes, but otherwise I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll send out this link and recording tomorrow morning.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but this was a great webinar, and I really appreciate it. We're doing a Hall of Fame. I mean, we have a Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
and I think we do it every other year. And
Okay.
we were talking about doing it this year at the golf tournament, but there was like way too many things going on, and we could not find a sports team because in the fall is our soccer, and we couldn't find an opposing team to play as a showcase.
Yeah.
So we are going to move it to the spring of next year. And that's just something to think about too. Like we didn't think about that originally, but our athletic director came back and he's like, oh, I'm going to do my best. But being a private school, you only have so many. And even like trying to find somebody outside of our regular district is really tough. So this spring with baseball, because some of our games are already on a Saturday, it was just, and we don't have like soccer's so big here. It's like you have every soccer player on our team is a club player,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it was great. I just wanted to add that point in of just like making sure, like if you're going to have these games, like giving your AD enough time to make sure.
I appreciate that call out. That's very true. And I think the challenge too, as you said, you are up against a wall with timing of there's a finite amount of time and weekends that are actually available to host this in any season. Add the school year overlay to that, as well as the club sports, and then just trying to find a competitor that would be that showcase team. There's a lot of angles you have to consider. And I would say I'm really glad that you made that decision to like push it to the right time and push it back rather than try and force anything through or push something that honestly, if it's not done, nothing has to be done perfectly because it never is, but if it's going to be more negative than positive in terms of your effort and return rate will be harder just because it's not what people were looking for. It's better to call it and do it the right way down the line. So, but that partnership with the AD is huge there.
So another question,
Yeah.
I don't know how closely you've worked with other schools on this particular thing, but another
Yeah.
topic that came up was, you know, we have our annual fund, and then of course we have like we call our sports fund booster here.
Yeah.
Anything related to sports is just booster.
Booster. Yeah.
So we were, you know, talking about like during the speech part of this type of thing is having the AD introduce our advancement
Yeah.
leader. I can't think of my brain's all over the place right now.
Your advancement
And just
director, whomever
like he
that
kind of like
is.
he's like selling her an advancement, and
Yeah.
we're not really doing like a direct ask, but we want it
Right.
to be like, hey, you are here. We not only would we like your money for the booster, but we would like your money for the advancement fund. Have you
Yeah.
seen any creative ways of kind of or anything different than what I mentioned?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. So I would say the advancement side is so particular about where your starting point is with the relationship with your alumni base already. Would you say that what's the relationship with the alumni right now? Is it a pretty decent one where you're getting engagement beyond fundraising, or is it like pulling teeth to try and get people in the door to fundraise?
Well, we are doing a pretty good job. I mean, we really only started concentrating on this within the past year and a half.
Okay.
And just in the past year alone, we've been targeting alumni to come to the events, setting up the tables
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Our first newsletter went out. I mean, I guess they did a newsletter like 15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but our first newsletter went out on the 31st. We put an alumni survey in there,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what the going rate of return is, but out of 100 or out of 884 opened emails, so far we've only had a return of 10 people on the survey, which is like
That's okay
just
enough.
about
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for growth.
Yeah.
But we, you know, the alumni that are making donations are not necessarily coming to the events.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're kind of tracking that now.
Yeah, so I think and maybe I'll send you through some like engagement pyramid that we've done previously, but it's so tough of like chicken and the egg of if you get people in the door to be attending events, then fundraising from them where they might historically not have given in the past could come more organically over time. It's the nurturing of relationships over a few years, and that's the thing with the return of fundraising is there are times where you're interacting with people who don't have giving capability now but will in the future. So the return in terms of like click through to fill in rate, that's pretty low. I don't know the size of your institution around open rates. Open rates are typically 35% in the education space. So you can get a sense across like email opens to total emails delivered. Um, I feel like I'm getting off track from your original question though of, you know, how do you link the sports to AD? I would actually, I think there's a lot of value around getting fellow alumni to help in fundraising too. And I think that having, you know, those alums who are part of the sport and like targeting their teammates might actually really be helpful as well. We've worked with schools that way where having that shared connection not only be at the school but be at the sports level, hearing from a teammate definitely has helped with fundraising. And also the biggest thing is the timeline of when are you doing the annual versus when are you doing some of that sports booster you're talking about, because you don't want to over tap where all of a sudden people are like, I'm out for everything. So it's like finessing to your calendar, really.
Okay, well, thank you. It was, that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for your time. And
Yes.
any follow-up questions, just let me know. I'll be sending out resources in a little bit. Have a good day, everyone. Did I just cancel?